your trusted destination for professional IT certification success. If you are preparing for the TOGAF Enterprise Architecture Foundation certification, then you are in the right place. In this video, we will cover real TOGAF Foundation exam questions with clear, beginner-friendly, classroom-style explanations, designed to help you understand concepts easily and improve your exam confidence. Our goal is not just to help you memorize answers, but to help you truly understand TOGAF concepts in a simple and professional way. Whether you are an architect, an IT professional, or a certification aspirant, these exam-focused explanations will help you move one step closer toward TOGAF certification success. So, stay focused, watch till the end, and let us master TOGAF Enterprise Architecture Foundation together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support CertiMaan for more real exam-style certification content. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, an architecture view is defined as the actual representation of a system from the perspective of a related set of concerns. A very important point to remember is that a view shows what stakeholders need to see in order to address their concerns. It presents architecture information in a meaningful way for a particular audience. Students commonly confuse view and viewpoint. In TOGAF, the viewpoint defines the rules and conventions for creating a view, while the view is the actual representation itself. This is why the correct answer is architecture, view. One simple memory trick is viewpoint equals how to create the view. View equals the actual representation shown to stakeholders. That is the key TOGAF concept being tested in this question. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, the enterprise continuum is a very important concept, used to organize and classify architecture and solution assets across the enterprise. One important point to remember is that the enterprise continuum helps create a common understanding and consistent communication between different groups involved in architecture work. It supports communication within the enterprise, between different enterprises, with vendors and external organizations, and by providing a common language for understanding architectural differences and levels of abstraction. This is why the correct answer is all of the above. Students should remember that the enterprise continuum is not only a classification mechanism, but also a communication tool that improves consistency and understanding across architecture activities. A simple way to remember this is enterprise continuum equals shared understanding across all architecture stakeholders. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, interoperability refers to the ability of systems to work together by sharing information and services effectively. Here, the question is specifically focusing on a common look and feel approach, using a portal-like solution. This directly relates to how users interact with systems, visually and functionally. In TOGAF, this concept is known as presentation interoperability. One important point to remember is that presentation interoperability focuses on creating a consistent user experience across multiple systems. Even if different applications exist in the background, users experience a unified interface through dashboards, portals, or integrated screens. This is why the correct answer is presentation interoperability. Students commonly remember this concept more easily with this simple idea. Presentation interoperability equals unified user interface experience. That is the key TOGAF concept being tested in this question. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, business scenarios are a recommended technique used to identify, understand, and document business requirements and business needs during an architecture initiative. One important point to remember is that the business scenario technique helps architects connect business problems with architectural solutions in a structured and practical way. TOGAF uses business scenarios to understand business drivers, capture stakeholder needs, clarify business requirements, validate the architecture effort through iterative refinement. The method works by describing real business situations, including the actors involved, business processes, and expected outcomes. This helps ensure that the architecture is aligned with actual business objectives. This is why the correct answer is business scenarios. Students commonly remember this concept with the following simple idea. Business scenario equals understanding business needs before designing architecture. That is the key TOGAF concept being tested in this question. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, an architecture viewpoint is created specifically to address the concerns of stakeholders. One important point to remember is that different stakeholders have different interests, responsibilities, and expectations from the architecture. Because of this, TOGAF uses viewpoints to ensure that architecture information is presented in a way that is meaningful to each stakeholder group. A viewpoint defines what should be shown, how it should be presented, which concerns must be addressed. This helps stakeholders clearly understand the architecture from their own perspective. This is why the correct answer is questo, stakeholder. Students commonly confuse view and viewpoint, so remember this simple concept. Stakeholder concerns drive the creation of a viewpoint. The viewpoint then creates the appropriate view. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, requirements management is a central and continuous activity that supports all phases of the ADM. One important point to remember is that architecture requirements are not handled only once at the beginning of the project. Instead, requirements are continuously identified, updated, validated, and managed throughout the ADM cycle. The requirements management phase ensures that relevant requirements are available to every ADM phase. Changes to requirements are properly controlled. Architecture work remains aligned with business needs. This phase acts as a central repository and coordination mechanism for requirements across the entire architecture effort. This is why the correct answer is Mr. Requirements Management. Students commonly remember this concept with this simple idea. Requirements management connects and supports all ADM phases. That is the key TOGAF concept being tested in this question. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, building blocks are fundamental components used to define, structure, and implement an architecture. One important point to remember is that building blocks represent reusable architectural capabilities or components that help architects create organized and consistent solutions. These building blocks can exist at different levels of abstraction and are used during architecture design and implementation activities. TOGAF commonly discusses building blocks as reusable architecture components, standardized solution elements, pieces that can be combined to form a complete architecture. They help architects simplify complex systems by breaking them into manageable and reusable parts. This is why the correct answer is they represent specific architectural components, aiding in the design and implementation of the architecture. Students commonly remember this concept with this simple idea. Building blocks equals reusable components used to construct architecture. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, the requirements impact assessment is an important activity within the requirements management process. One important point to remember is that requirements can change throughout the ADM lifecycle. Whenever a new requirement appears or an existing requirement changes, architects must understand how that change impacts the current architecture work. The purpose of the requirements impact assessment is to evaluate which ADM phases are affected, which architectural components may need updates, whether additional work, changes, or revisions are required. This helps ensure that architecture development remains controlled, consistent, and aligned with business needs, even when requirements evolve. This is why the correct answer is to evaluate how new requirements affect ongoing architecture work. Students commonly remember this concept with this simple idea. Impact assessment equals understanding the effect of requirement changes on architecture work. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, the architecture repository is the central structure used to store, organize, and manage architecture assets. One important point to remember is that enterprise architecture produces many valuable artifacts, such as models, standards, reference architectures, governance information, and reusable building blocks. TOGAF requires a structured way to maintain all these assets so they can be reused effectively across the organization. The architecture repository helps architects store architecture deliverables and artifacts, maintain reusable assets and standards, support consistency across architecture initiatives, enable easier access and governance of architecture information. It acts as a centralized knowledge base for architecture work within the enterprise. This is why the correct answer is an architecture repository. Students commonly remember this concept with this simple idea. Architecture repository equals central storage location for architecture assets. That is the key TOGAF concept being tested in this question. Now, let us understand this question carefully. In TOGAF, reference models are standardized models that provide guidance and a common foundation for developing enterprise architectures. One important point to remember is that TOGAF includes reference models to help organizations create architectures in a more structured, consistent, and reusable way. The TOGAF standard includes models such as GRM, Governance Reference Model, MSA, Microservices Architecture. These reference models help organizations align architecture practices, governance approaches, and modern architectural styles with enterprise objectives. TOGAF uses these models as foundational guidance, so architects do not need to start everything from scratch. This is why the correct answer is GRM and MSA. Students commonly remember this concept with this simple idea. TOGAF reference models equals standard architectural guidance for enterprises. So that's all in this video. Thanks for watching this video. Have a great learning.